Hello and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports Media. Back in the studio with myself, Chris Herrera, and Scott Bryant, covering the games from last week and games that we have starting actually tonight. There'll be some games on the docket, so we'll have games tonight, tomorrow, and Saturday. A lot of the schools trying to play tonight because we have Easter weekend, so it's a good time to be playing some football. The weather's getting a lot nicer, and give the kids an opportunity to get out there and have a good time. The results of the pandemic are starting to get better, so we're starting to see more people being able to attend games and things like that. So it's been pretty exciting for the kids. Lots of great football going on nowadays. And where we're at in this whole thing, we mentioned last week that we're going to stick with football for the next couple of weeks, and then we'll get into the spring sports. So just too much to cover in such a little amount of time, and we want to do it this whole thing the right way. And so for us, we missed the boat the last couple of weeks on one of the better teams in the area, Hillmar Yellow Jackets. Hillmar had two pretty tough opponents their first two games out, and came out on the right side. Both times they beat Atwater 35-19, 35-16, something like that. And then what was the score this week, Scott, in their game?
Yeah, Hillmar played Buhawk Colony, and they beat them 31-27, and that's no easy feat. I mean, Buhawk is, I think they went the last time they were able to take the field for a regular season, I think they went undefeated and ended up losing the playoffs. But again, Hillmar, we still consider them, I guess, for lack of a better term, in the small schools kind of conversation. But they, year in and year out, Hillmar if they're on your schedule, that's a tough out. I mean, they play in the TVL. They're always one of the top three teams in the TVL. But I think they're showing their muscle right now by beating two big schools. Quite honestly, it's not really a surprise to me because I've seen them play a lot over the years. Back in the day, we played them, and I got to tell you, it's always a well-coached team. They always have some really tough kids there, and Hillmar is a very good program historically, and it doesn't look like they've dropped off at all.
Yeah, I think they had a lot of aspirations to play for state this year. They had returned Seth Miguel, who's their quarterback. Seth's a phenomenal athlete. And so, and as well as I think they returned, I want to say, I heard the rumor that they returned like 15, 18 kids, something like that, from their team from last year that I believe lost to Escalon in playoffs, and Escalon goes on to win the state. So those two teams are also in the TVL along with Ripon. So Ripon and Escalon both go down and win state in a year that Hillmar, is a little bit younger, but returning all those players. And so Hillmar's, they're a beast. I mean, they've always been, they're good in all, they just have a lot of dedicated players that really want to get after it, but they're good across the board in a lot of different sports.
Yeah, you go with Hillmar, this is kind of dating myself a little bit, but you go back to the days back in the 80s and those teams with Jerry Van Liegen and the teams that he put on the field, that, there's a culture there, and the culture is winning. And like you said, it carries over to their other sports. That's a great high school, and like I said, when you see Hillmar on your schedule, that's going to be a tough out every time.
Yeah, and my apologies. I dropped the ball on this week. We just didn't. It's hard to cover all the schools that we're covering, and Hillmar played two schools that are not schools that we actually cover. They're down in Atwater, so. It not to make excuses, but I think that's where we kind of missed the boat. So, there's not a lot of negative things to say about Hillmar. There's a lot of good things that come out of that school, and I expect them to finish the spring very solid, and coming out into the fall, putting a pretty good product on the field. They're a systematic type of approach, and so they just they don't rebuild, they just reload.
Yeah, and kind of the last thing I'll say to that, if you consider, what their mentality is, just the fact that they're scheduling Atwater and they're scheduling Buhawk Colony when maybe there were other options on the table, and not only scheduling them but beating them. I think that speaks volumes. So congrats to Helmar. Not surprised at all. It's definitely something that it's just unfortunate they didn't get the opportunity to play for a state championship, because I'm sure they would have gone far. So we're gonna roll on to a couple more scores. As we do, we get most of our information from Max Preps, and every now and then we'll get a box score maybe emailed to us or things like that. But it's really hard for us to highlight individual players on some of these scores if we're not getting the information from Max Preps or from another source. But kind of rolling down the line here, Argonaut took on a big school in Cordova and handled them pretty well, 35-0. And Cordova is one of those schools that back in the 80s and the 90s when Max Miller was a head coach there, they beat everybody. In fact, I think that's where Troy Taylor, who now is the head coach of Sac State, that's where he came out of. And so they produced some really good teams. So I guess I'm a little shocked to see a score like this, but again, Argonauts, they're the real deal. It's a good football program, well-coached team, 35-0 over Cordova. Moving on down into the Valley, we had on March 26th, we had a whole roster of games. I'll start off with Linden Big Valley Christian. I think Big Valley Christian was coming off a win. Linden had, they were coming off, I believe the last game was against Lodi.
Yeah.
So coming off a really tough game, lost their starting quarterback in that game. So they had to regroup and take on Big Valley. Ran away with this one 34-6. And, when we take a quick look at the stats, Joe Callan, sophomore, he had to take the start at quarterback, step in for Alex Herrera, who went out with a broken hand. He was 5 of 28, threw for a touchdown, and had one interception. But I think the real story here in this game was the running game. James Sherman, a kid that we've talked about on the show before, he pretty much just had a field day there. Ran whenever he touched the ball, he got to do whatever he wanted. He had 19 carries for 298 yards. He couldn't get those 2 other yards to get the 300. When your average per carry is 15.7 yards, holy smokes, you were running hard. He had his longest run was 81 yards, and he racked up 4 touchdowns. So that gives him 6 touchdowns on the year, I believe. Yeah. So that those are some pretty awesome numbers. And then just kind of going through some of the defensive stats. Let's drop down into that. So we had Lucas Davis had 10 total tackles. Joe Callan and Alejandro Perez both had 5 each, and so did Jack McCann. So I think that was a defense by group effort, and that was a good victory for Linden.
Yeah, it was. And rolling along, Central Catholic played Merced. Central Catholic kind of squeaks one out against the Merced Bears. They win 14-13. The Dominic Perino was 8 for 14 for 99 yards. And Tyler Wentworth, the backup, was 3 for 8 for 53. The story of the game looks like Jack Grizzle, 25 carries for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns. And so, both of those teams just punch you in the mouth, and it's going to be kind of who gives in first. And it doesn't look like anybody gave in, but there were a lot of seems like a pretty good defensive game. There were 15, 16 guys with multiple tackles, couple of sacks, couple tackles for losses type of thing. So it looked like one of those old rock'em sock'em games where you're just going to kind of get after it with each other, and the tougher team kind of prevails. And we didn't get to see it in person, so it's kind of hard for us, and Merced doesn't enter any stats, but Central Catholic just keeps chugging along. They might have a little bit tougher week this week as they play St. Mary's tonight. So good luck to both of those programs.
Yeah, that's going to be a good game tonight. I think that's going to be a good matchup. I mean, when Central can beat Merced, that's always good for their program. But again, we talk about this every time. It's from a fan standpoint, it's frustrating to not be able to go and physically sit in the stands and watch the game. But if there was a game that maybe, there's probably 4 or 5 games that I'd want to go see tonight, but St. Mary Central would definitely be one of those games. I've been to those games before, and they never, regardless of who wins the game, those games never disappoint in terms of excitement and, rivalry and all those things. They check all the boxes. That's going to be a good game tonight, no question.
Yeah, I think it's two different approaches too. St. Mary's wants to sling it, little bit of speed, and you have that power running game and defensive, toughness of Central Catholic. So the Holy Bull probably will live up to its name tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Another score that we want to mention, it's a little bit out of our purview, but Riverbank is a school that we want to cover. Unfortunately for them this week, it's probably not a score that they want us to talk about, and we won't spend too much time on it, but they played Orastemba over on the west side, and they ended up losing by a score of 53-0. And, Riverbank's one of those schools that's kind of, they're kind of in surrounded by a lot of good programs, and hopefully here in the next year they can kind of get it together and put a good program on the field. Not to take away from the kids this week, but again, that's a game that we were not able to see, but I'm sure that there were probably a lot of mistakes made. Anytime you have a 53-0, there's going to be things that don't go your way. So
yeah, we're in a situation here for us, like we mentioned before, that we're heavily reliant on max preps. So for us to be able to completely cover a game is difficult without having some statistics input. So I just was kind of flying through the games last Friday night. Had McNair putting it on Franklin 42-0. Modesto High played Turlock. Turlock put it on them 74-13. Edison had their way with Stagg, winning 63-7. And Houston had their way with El Capitan, winning 48-8. And none of those the box scores, it's kind of, again, it's very difficult to cover if we don't have some access to statistics, but those games were all kind of runaway blowouts.
Yeah, we had another instance, big school versus small school. The outcome was a little bit predictable here, where we had Western Ranch playing Denair. Denair coming from the Southern League, coming up to play Western Ranch out of Stockton. Final score is 26-6. I think the story here was just the offense of Western Ranch and what they were able to accomplish, and everything. Not too much on the running game. I think they had 2 players that had negative yardage. I think their leading rusher was 14 yards, so not too much in the running game. Noah Deed got to play a little bit of quarterback, a freshman. He was 3 of 4 for 121 yards, 2 touchdowns and an interception. So he kind of led the way in terms of quarterbacking. They also had a couple other guys, so they platooned 3 quarterbacks in that effort. Defensively, this is where I think they really excel. They were all over the field. They had let's see here. Namir Brown Sanger, he had 9 tackles on the evening, and total he had 8 assists, total 17 tackles with 2 for a loss. So he had quite a night. But you could look down their roster, and again it was defense by group, and they manhandled Denair pretty well.
Another game we're able to cover pretty easily because the box scores are filled out is the Lincoln Tokay game. Lincoln is a phenomenal team. Lincoln's probably has, they're probably in the middle of a little bit of a dynasty for themselves. They're going to always run into the buzzsaw at St. Mary's as far as the TCAL is concerned, but the rest of the area is going to suffer at the hands of such a potent offense. You have Kenyon Nelson heading the ship there at the quarterback position. He was 7 for 11 for 240 and 3 touchdowns for a quarterback rating of 147. Jonah Coleman had 6 carries for 122 yards rushing, an average of 20 yards a carry, and 3 touchdowns. 3 guys averaged over 8 yards a carry. He had Ty Deloney and Kenyon Nelson also Ty was 9 for 68, and Kenyon had 5 for 50. On the receiving end, you had Fidel Pitts, had 2 catches for 73 yards and a touchdown, and Jonah Coleman also had 2 catches for 92 and a touchdown. this in a blowout, the clock's running, and a lot of things don't changed. The one thing that I will mention about this Tokay bunch is they have this Filippini is a very good athlete, running back. He's a tough as they come. He was 22 for 53, had a long rushing yard of 14, and Jacob Varney was 1 for 33 yards rushing. And I believe Jacob plays the quarterback position. So Ty D. Donato was 6 for 16 for 78 and a touchdown and a pick. And Jacob was 3 for 9 for 35. So it was a very lopsided game, but a lot of talent on that field. You have multiple Division I offers to the Lincoln players. Filippini's got an offer as well, and I believe a couple of their other players have offers. So you have a ton of talent on that field. That just one team is just that good. So
yeah, and I think unfortunately we just recently got news. I don't know. We can't confirm it, but the rumor is that their game is getting canceled for this evening for COVID restrictions, and so if true, that's unfortunate. But that's just kind of the way the times we're in. But Lincoln again is going to be, I say it all the time, and I get excited about these big matchups. But I wish I could go to the Lincoln St. Mary's matchup every year. That's going to be a great game.
Yeah.
So hopefully Lincoln can get healthy, and if that's the case, and be prepared to play St. Mary's. I believe in a couple of weeks they're on the schedule.
Yep.
With that said, I think we had mentioned the St. Mary's Tracy game a little bit earlier. St. Mary's pulling off the victory 54-14. Just to run down a couple of stats here for Tracy. Drew Frederick Jr., quarterback, he was 5 of 17, 78 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He split some time with Noah Deneau. And then on the rushing side of things, it looks like Drew Frederick was probably spending a lot of time running out of the pocket. 10 carries for 55 yards. Touchdowns, the one touchdown scored by Noah Deneau rushing, and then I believe they had a receiving touchdown as well. On the St. Mary's side of the ball, you had Cruz Herrera and Nathan Arnaudo both splitting time at quarterback. Nathan Arnaudo was 5 for 5 with 3 touchdowns and 49, almost 50 yards thrown, and then Cruz Herrera was 1 of 2 with 11 yards. Moving down, rushing-wise, Tyree Washington had 10 carries for 146 yards, probably the story of the game. Whenever you're playing in a game like that and you can offensively do what you want, you try to keep the ball on the ground, mainly just so you can run that clock out.
Yeah.
And so it appears to me that's what St. Mary's did. They just handed the ball off to Tyree Washington, and we were talking about James Sherman earlier having 15 yards per carry. Tyree had 14.6 yards per carry. That's very respectable against a Tracy program. And then defensively, just a couple of things. Let's see here. St. Mary's seems like we talk about him every week. Max Rascon had 14 tackles total for St. Mary's, and then Devin Harwell had 8 tackles, 2 for a loss. Nick Murray was 8 tackles, and Isaiah Aponte had 12. And so defensively, they're very solid.
This is where we talk about not only being able to look at a box score and it kind of doesn't tell the whole story. I was fortunate enough to see the game. Nathan Arnaudo had a heck of a game. Kid's 5 for 5. I think it was like 250 passing and 3 touchdowns, and it was senior night. So he draws the start. They come out and just punch Tracy in the mouth right off the bat. They put 3 on the board in the first quarter, and then Tyree kind of takes over later in the game. But Nathan had a one heck of a game. Played the position very solidly. Made quick decisions. Got rid of the ball well. Devin Harwell went off. The 8 tackles don't tell the story. He was all over the field. But also, just like every single week we talked about Max. Max is just a different player, as well as Aponte. Both of those kids playing the backer position, super solid. And then Nick Murray locking him down at safety. So that game was, Tracy's no slouch, but St. Mary's is that talented this year. So it was a tough game for them. That's just my 2 cents, as I was able to actually watch the game in person.
Yeah, and that was a good pickup because I think I had mentioned Nathan had 49.6 yards. He had 49.6 yards average.
Yeah.
So let's put that where that is. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Like you said, 248 yards.
Very, very good week. And we'll rolling right along. One of the matchups we talked about early last week was the Ripon Manteca game. Ripon, being the smaller school, but they're right down the road from each other. Put up a valiant fight, lost 47-28 to the Buffaloes. Aaron Wood for Ripon was 11 for 17 for 243 and 4 touchdowns, so really good night for Aaron. Manteca's Chris Charles was 7 for 14 for 155, no touchdowns, but they did their damage on the ground. Chris Charles had 35 yards rushing on 9 carries. Khalid Robinson, 9 carries for 114 and 2 touchdowns. Lion Cologne was had 22 carries for 167 and 3 touchdowns, and Blake Nicholson, a sophomore, had 2 carries for 11 and a touchdown. Receiving side, you had Robinson with 90 yards receiving, and Nicholson with 65 receiving for Manteca. Mason Knight had 35 and a touchdown receiving for Ripon. Malik Taylor, heck of a night for this kid, catches 3 balls for 136 yards and 3 touchdowns. So at 45 yards a clip. So that's a pretty good night for Mr. Taylor. And again, Ripon had, they had their hands full with a very, very good team. Manteca and Ripon both were, both very talented teams last year. Ripon happened to graduate a ton of their athletes. I think they graduated 17 or 18. So it was a big number. I'm not exactly sure what the number was, but Ripon will be back. You can rest assured with that. So
yeah, Ripon again. I put, when you talk about the TVL and you talk about their top teams every year, you're having the same conversation. There's some programs that will pop up every now and then, but when you talk about TVL, you're always talking about Escalon, you're talking about Ripon, you're talking about Hilmar. Used to always, or at least in recent years, it was Patterson was in that conversation. But yeah, Ripon's just one of those programs. If they do have an off year, it's not normal. And again, this is not a normal year, so that's what we're dealing with there. Another score that I wish we had more information on, because it sounds like it was a fantastic game, is the Oakdale Sierra score. Oakdale pulling off the victory 21-20. Maybe it was an extra point. I don't know. But again, we don't have statistics on that, but that must have been a heck of a football game to see those two great programs come down to the wire. 1-point victory going to Oakdale.
Yeah. Rolling right along, we had East Union play Kimball. We do get a box score there. East Union comes up 3 points short to loses 32-29 to a battle-tested Kimball team. Luke Weaver was 6 for 13 for 82 and 2 touchdown and 2 picks. Nick Coronado was 16 for 26 for 217 and 3 touchdowns, no picks. Nick is he's the leader at this point, I think, in the clubhouse with yards passing, and
one
probably
of our top players last week.
Yeah, sure. And kind of returns and does the exact same thing. Running the ball, looks like Jonte Maggard was 22 for 120 and 2 touchdowns for East Union. And you had Alonzo Jackson for Kimball, had 29 carries for 177 and a touchdown. So that's pretty phenomenal. You have Zelmar Vetter at East Union had a catch for a 46-yard catch for a touchdown. You had Mason Rivera on the Kimball side, had 3 catches for 95 and a touchdown. Dominic Suniga was 2 for 38. And then Dylan Anderson had 2 catches for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns, so he made the most of his 2 catches. On the defensive side of the ball, then if we're skipping the defense side, we're just not getting enough information. So Escalon, or East Union, actually put up some of their stats. So the leading tackler was Nevin Gonzalez. He had 13 tackles, 9 of them being solo. And then you had they actually had 12 tackles for a loss, so that's a pretty crazy. Lane Cefalu with 4 of those tackles for losses and 8 tackles on the night. So, it looked like a very competitive game, probably one of those ones we would wish we could have been in the stand.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to kind of highlight this a little bit more in the fact that, Kimball is, you got to give them a lot of credit. They've been dealing with some adversity lately. And, you know, we're going to talk about something just for a couple minutes here. We don't know the whole story. We don't know what prompted it, but Kimball basically is playing without their head coach this season. Just prior to their first game, their head coach was, for lack of a better term, was dismissed. The article in the Tracy newspaper basically said that his contract was not renewed. To me, there's got to be more to the story. And so, basically, on the day of their game, this is a quote from the head coach from Kimball. He said, "They told me I was terminated on Friday. I asked why. They told me that they didn't have to give me a reason." And that's from their head coach. And I always say this name wrong, so correct me if I'm not saying it right, but it's Mike Kuhnlins is the head coach. And I don't know what the background is on this. I think it's unfortunate that whatever the reason that he was removed from that position, I think you've got to give a lot of credit to those kids on that Kimball football team. But as you look back, I think that's also a reflection that this guy must have done a very good job.
Yeah, he's an offensive wizard. I mean, he's put, Kimball is in a very tough, and the VOL is a very tough conference. You're seeing Manteca and Sierra and East Union and the like, Oakdale. You're getting everybody's best effort every night. So you don't get a lot of nights off, and Kimball puts up a ton of points. They struggle a little bit on the defensive side of the ball, but I think that they were up and coming. It's unfortunate, like we said, we don't have all the information, so we're not going to pass judgment, but it is a testament to those kids' resilience and their attitudes and their efforts that they're not going to and my dad, as we grew up, my dad used to tell me, I don't care why you do something, whether it's in spite of me or because of me. I just want you to do it. And I think that's a mindset the kids took. So they're probably doing it because of the coach and in spite of the school, because there's probably some animosity there that they lost their leader. So again, it's unfortunate. Hopefully the coach lands on his feet and gets,
sure.
I've heard nothing but good things with Coach. I've never met him as a person,
Yep.
but
I've heard nothing but positive things about him. And if you're a school that is looking for a head coach, this might be a guy to consider. So, hopefully he lands on his feet, and hopefully whatever that situation was, it wasn't as big of a deal as maybe what some people might think it is.
Yeah.
Which again, we don't know what that is, and hopefully he can move on and be successful somewhere else. So, one of the final scores we'll talk about here, Chavez and Bear Creek. We only had stats put in from Chavez, but again, this looks like score-wise, it was probably a pretty good game. Chavez getting the victory, Chavez High School out of Stockton getting the victory 32-18. When you look at Chavez, some of their statistics, Brandon Wood, starting quarterback, senior, he was 8 of 15, 101 yards, touchdown, interception, but really, I think the story of the game was their running game. You had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different guys carry the ball. 3 of them in double digits. You had Ruben Hooks was the leading rusher. He had 13 carries for 103 yards. His longest being a 34-yard run. He had 2 touchdowns. And I don't have the first name on this young man, but Falk Tyndall, who was a senior running back, he was 9 of 50, 5.6 yard average with a long of 19, and he had a touchdown. But then you also had Daniel Herrera had 12 carries for 71 yards, and Davion Bailey, junior running back, had 10 of 47. So when you look at Chavez and you see who they've got in their backfield, you see their quarterback is let's just confirm. No, their quarterback's a senior, so hopefully they've got something in the works there. But I think the running game's going to be in really good shape over the next couple of years when you look at who they have in the backfield, and hopefully they can grow off of that. And I'm sure to get numbers like that against any team, you've got to have a good offensive line. So I'm sure that's the case there. But like I said, and you've been saying all along, it makes it a lot easier to highlight players when we can actually see what they've accomplished. And so, if you're a parent, a fan,
Coach,
coach,
AD.
whatever, anybody can be approved to enter the stats on here. So, this is about highlighting. Our program is about highlighting local high school athletes, and we really want to do a better job of that, but that's going to have to be from the assistance of people getting those stats.
Well, and it's important for the kids. I mean, this is their legacy. This is what they have to show. When they're 30, 40, 50 years old, they want to be able to show their kids and grandchildren and wives and whatever that, where they've been from. So I think it's important that we pay some attention to this. We make sure we get our stats put in regularly. And I know it's difficult. We already have a pretty taxing job, so try to find an assistant or scorekeeper or somebody that's willing to do it. But moving on to some more of the scores, we're at the southern end of our section. Waterford goes up to Mariposa County, and looks like it was just a phenomenal game, 34-32. It looks like it came down to the end because Waterford wins 34-32. They scored 13 in the fourth quarter to Mariposa's 7. Aaron Adams is 10 for 23 for 157 and 2 touchdowns. For Waterford at Mariposa, Wyatt Green is 13 for 30 for 189, a touchdown and 2 picks. The story of the game looks like the ground game for Waterford. Aaron Adams was 24 carry. So you get 75 rushes for Waterford in a night. So Aaron Adams, 25 for 147 for a touchdown. Seth Reynolds, 24 for 108. And then Ryan Hilton was 23 for 116 for all. So all 3 kids go over the century mark. Aiden Lopez from Mariposa County is 12 for 61 for a touchdown. On the receiving side, looks like Javier Newsom had 3 catches for 102 and a touchdown for Waterford. And then on the receiving side for Mariposa, you had Ryan Soto had 4 catches for 69 yards. Aiden Lopez had 2 for 72 and a touchdown. And then Ty Richards had 1 for 34. So,
I've got to talk about this for a second because I don't know if it's still the same way that it used to be, but years ago, Mariposa High School, their home football field was at the fairgrounds. Is that still the case?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but we played there.
Okay. So, maybe a lot of it is folklore. I don't know, but we all know that Mariposa, they always put a great product on the field. They've turned out, they've got Super Bowl, a couple Super Bowl rings that can be attributed all the way back to Mariposa High School. But this is where it kind of gets fun for me because I know back in the day, their football field was in at the fairgrounds, and it was the same field that in the summertime would double as where they would have the destruction derbies.
Yeah.
And so, people would say, you go up there and you play and you're playing football and, there's some fields that you go to and there's gopher holes or maybe the field's getting worn because there's been too many games on it. But used to be you go to Mariposa and it's like, well, there'd be a bolt on the field, like you get tackled and there's a bolt on the field or there's some metal or some glass. And so, if that's the case, maybe that's why those guys are so tough from Mariposa. I mean, it's like, they do produce some very tough football players and, that might be part of it. So if you've got any information on that, if I'm off base or if there's some truth to that, I'd love to hear more because that's one of those high school football stories that I think are fun to talk about.
Sure. Let's just fly through the rest of these. We're not going to have time to just sit and dive through all of them. But Houston goes to El Capitan, wins 48-8. You have Calaveras traveled to Somerville. Calaveras comes out victorious 27-8. We already talked about Lodi. Lodi goes to West and really just thrashes West 62-0. Enox plays Downey in Downey. Enox prevails 20-14. Gustine to Delhi. Gustine walks away with the victory at 40-14. LeGrand travels to Livingston, winning a tight one at 12-7. I heard the Grigori Pittman game was pretty entertaining. Grigori goes to Pittman, loses 40-28, but 68 points scored in a high school game is pretty impressive.
Sure.
So, we're gonna not be able to cover every sport, every game, every night, but we're trying to get a little bit more under the hood with some of these games, so we can give praise and accolades to the kids that are deserving. So don't shoot us for trying to do the best we can do. Just we appreciate your support. It was awesome this last week. I got a couple of people reached out to us and let us know, hey, you missed a really good game. So that put us on there, those games on our radar. We really enjoy that. We know, our listening audience isn't as broad as it will be one day, but so right now we like to cater to the people that are supporting us and are backing us 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we talk about this offline a little bit, and we like to maybe pick our 3 players of the week. And I was thinking maybe this week I'll pick one, you pick one,
Sure.
but I have a third that I think you'll agree with me on, and we'll get to that in a
Okay.
sec. But I'm going to pick one that I know maybe it's better for me to pick than you, but I have to go back to James Sherman. I mean, he 19 carries for 298 yards with a 15-yard average and 4 touchdowns. I don't care who you're playing. Those are great numbers. So that's going to be my pick for this week. I think he had an outstanding game.
Yeah, James did a very, very good job. Our line did a good job for him, but James is an athlete, so sometimes he turned lemons into lemonade, and he had a very, very good night. My pick for the week is going to be Nathan Arnaudo. Nate, for the 250 yards passing and 3 touchdowns, I believe, or 4 touchdowns is what he had. That's a senior night. You go and you're getting to play, a pretty talented Tracy team in your yard in a year after COVID where, Nate's not been a quarterback his whole life. He's learned the position in the last, 10, 12 months or so. He's been a former tight end and a punter. So for him, he did a really good job managing the game, making good reads, and all those types of things. So my player of the week is Nathan Arnaudo.
And so for the third player of the week, this is going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to choose the entire Kimball High School football team as the third player of the week. I just think what they're doing on the field is a credit to just not only those young men, but also, to the coach that was there. And for them to kind of almost ignore any adversity and take care of the task at hand, because East Union is not an easy victory. That's a great win for their program. East Union is a very good football program. And so for Kimball to pull that off, that I think you'll agree with me, we're going to have them as even though it's the entire team, we're going to have them as our players of the week.
100%. We could go down with a bunch of different schools. There's some honorable mentions probably to pretty much anybody at Lincoln for last week's offensive showing. But it's at some point you got to cut it off. I mean, we can't talk about everybody every time, so we're going to do our best to cover as many of these games as possible and highlight the ones we're able to cover that week. So this weekend, a lot again, week 3. A lot of games out there. Oakdale opens or plays in East Union tonight. Western Ranch travels to Ripon. The Kimball team we just mentioned, our third player of the week, goes down to Patterson to play. Escalon's at Kimball. Sierra's at Manteca. Downey's at Grigori. Millennium plays Big Valley Christian. The Holy Bowl, St. Mary's plays Central Catholic.
The Holy Bowl.
And then you have
always a good game.
The crosstown rivals, Galt, going to go to Liberty Ranch. That 1 mile drive that they need to make to go ahead and do battle on up there in Galt tonight.
Yeah, so like you said, some good games this week. Looking forward to the outcomes and having this discussion again on the next podcast.
Yes, sir. A couple of other games I just wanted to throw out there real quick. Hillmar doesn't do themselves any more favors. They go down to Merced. And then probably one of the better matchups of the weekend is going to be the Calaveras at Argonaut. So
Calaveras Argonaut should be.
Yeah, they always battle each other pretty well. Argonaut, Calaveras is just a juggernaut. They're year after year pretty damn good. And then Argonaut's really put it together the last couple of years. So there's a lot of talent in the area. We're super excited to be doing this podcast for everybody, and we're hoping that we're going to just continue to get more information and feed that information to our audience and listeners and do all these kids justice. So we really appreciate you guys listening. Everybody stay safe and healthy tonight, this weekend. Enjoy your Easter. We'll be back next Thursday posting the broadcast. covering the games that we've spoke about already, and probably much, much more. Somebody's going to come out of the woodwork and just shock us, and hopefully we have the information to be able to highlight that kid this week. So thank you for listening, everybody, and have a great weekend.